I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. We continue today for our month-long special series on how Minnesota's Black community is joining with agencies and organizations, government, political leaders, community leaders, church leaders to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Pleased today to have State Representative Rena Moran join the program to talk about her work in state government to shepherd engagement, inclusion, and effective response to the COVID-19 pandemic in our community. And as always, I'm here with my colleague, Brenda Lyle Gray. Brenda joining us remotely. And Brenda, as always, thank you for being on these conversations. You write the story out of these interviews, and you continue to deliver great information to our readers and listeners with your participation. So thank you so much. Representative Moran, first of all, season's greetings to you. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Hope you and your family are doing well. What's on your mind and as the season unfolds right now? And you have to unmute. Yeah, there, unmute. There we go.
Okay, let's start this, right? So just want to say first, Merry Christmas to you. Happy New Year's. It is always great to be on the Al McFarlane Show. It is always, important, and I get excited knowing that I'm going to bring the voices from the Capitol back to the community. And hopefully I can continue to, to bring that voice from the community into the Capitol. Mm-hmm. It is good work. Work that I'm excited about. COVID has, like some of us say in our community, has showed up and showed out, right? It has impacted so many families, individuals' lives, not only in Minnesota, but across our country, across the world. And here we are in the season, in the spirit of giving and joy, in a season of family. And it's been difficult. It's been difficult for so many individuals to try to, celebrate the spirit of the season, knowing that COVID is still out there lurking in our communities across the state of Minnesota. But we're going into 2021 soon. Session starts on January the 5th. And I think we have a plan to try to recover from this.
Let me take a minute just to give listeners more of your background. Representative Moran, state representative, represents District 65A in St. Paul. That includes the Frogtown, Summit University, Hamlin, Midway, and North End neighborhoods in the city of St. Paul. And, your occupation, as far as your profession, is a director of parent leadership. I know that you're a community organizer and person that promotes and supports entrepreneurism in our community. But your training is your BS in early childhood education from Southern Illinois University. And now you're in your 6th term in the Minnesota State Legislature representing your district. You first were elected in 2010. And I remember when you were elected and, you've never taken being elected for granted. You work every election cycle for every vote that you get, and you get the votes. You're a family person. You've got 7 children, right?
I do.
Amazing.
I do.
You came to Twin Cities from Chicago, I think in the early 2000s. And the notes I have say, and you've told me this before, that you were struggling when you first got here. But through that struggle, you and John Harrington became the first Black legislators in St. Paul's history. So that's a major accomplishment. And you've often reminded the community that you are the great-great-granddaughter of enslaved Africans. And so you take our culture, our history, our legacy very seriously. Mm-hmm. And you move and act in a way that demands respect, that commands dignity. One of the things you've done, among many, is the Crown Act. I'm going to actually talk about that. It's important. It's something that people want us to say is not important. You've properly identified a reason to speak up for cultural dignity awareness, which is foundational, and you can discuss that in a minute. But let me say that you have a personal experience with COVID-19. Last time we talked, I think you and Tony Carter, Commissioner Carter, and I were on together, and you told me that you had personally had COVID early on. Talk about that if you would. So you know what you're talking about.
That's right. And life has showed up like that for me. As a mother of 7 kids, I have 4 adult sons and now 3 adult daughters. I'm a grandmother of 8 kids, and, so family, who we are, is totally important to me. And it has to be important to how we look at the world at the state level too, right? And how we create policies that create practices. It's important. And so here we were, early March, we decided in the legislature that it was no longer safe to do in-person, to legislate in person. And 2 weeks after we shut down at the Capitol, April 3rd, I began to have symptoms of, just not feeling right, a lingering headache, extremely tired, could not keep my eyes open, body aches, a fever. And I remember going, and at the time, my daughter, her family were living with me. And I said to her, I'm going into my bedroom over the weekend. That was a Thursday. And I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I know I just don't feel right. And I'm going to lock my door. And for the grandkids, do not knock on my door, right? I'm just going to isolate myself for the weekend. And it was still early in the process, and we're still trying to figure out this COVID and what was those symptoms and what did that look like. And I came out like on a Tuesday, went in on a Thursday, came out on Tuesday. And I felt, pretty okay, still had this lingering headache that continued to, just linger. But the body aches were still there a little bit, but the fever was gone. And I thought I felt good enough to, get up and start moving around. Plus my birthday was coming up, and I thought, I was planning this big event for my birthday. But I also had this procedure that I was going to get done. And so in order to get that procedure done, you had to be tested. And I remember going in to do some of the preliminary tests. And of course, they ask you, what are your symptoms? So my symptoms at that time was I felt pretty decent, but I had lost all sense of taste and smell.
Wow.
And that was the trigger for them. I could not taste or smell anything. And I could smell almost anything, the smallest of anything. And from that, I did the test, and the test came back positive. And so for me, and because we're still early in the process, it was like if you test, you need to isolate for another 10 days. And then I was getting, well, maybe you don't need to, isolate. You've already isolated. It's been more than 10 days since you've isolated. But I ended up isolating myself and my family for the whole month of April. Because we just didn't know. We were still trying to figure out, whether or not you need to take a second test or a third test, whether or not the virus was still alive in your body, even though, you may have another positive, you're not contagious. So I went through all of those dynamics the first week in April, the first month of April. And, and it really, impacted my family. My grandson, was in distant learning at that time, and he was sleeping like 12 hours a day. We could not get him to stay woke. He could not keep his eyes open. But that was the breath of what happened to me early in the process with COVID-19.
So he probably was impacted too, your grandson, you think?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's got to be frightening. It's got to be frightening. Yeah.
It absolutely is. And it's still frightening today to even think back on that when we've seen so many people's, passed from COVID-19, knowing that it impacts different people different ways.
Right.
And we are not only responsible for ourselves, but we're responsible for others,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so me isolating for a whole month and not taking that for granted, not knowing whether or not I could, infect someone else, that their degree of illness will be different from me. And just knowing that, at any moment I could encounter someone and they may die or pass away from something that I recovered from.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's still scary today to think
Sobering.
about the impact. Yeah.
And so you have been at the table and providing a leadership voice, leadership energy around ensuring that, number one, your constituents in particular, but all Minnesotans, and specifically, people of color, Black, Asian, Latino, members of the Twin Cities and of the state of Minnesota. And your district, by the way, is a very diverse district, I think, with large Latino, Asian, I think Somali and African American and white populations. You can describe the demographics if you would of your district, but you've been a voice pushing for making sure the assets in the community get rallied, engaged, and supported in a all hands on deck fight for awareness and fight against COVID-19. How does that look from your point of view as a legislator? What have you been trying to do and succeeded in doing in providing legislative leadership?
Yeah. Al, it is really, in my mind, it's really, really important, which my district is. At one point, it was 1/3 Caucasian, 1/3 African American, and 1/3 Hmong, with some Latina and maybe a small population of indigenous folks, but evenly divided. And for me as a legislator, and because I know my own personal experience impact, decision making, and for my own work as a mother, my first piece of activism came in. My story is being homeless when I came here in 2000 with my 6 kids, living in a shelter, and realizing that I needed some support going to the States. And realizing I went to the state, I knew that, yes, I was homeless, but I had to get a job, but I had to get a home, right? I had to find housing, but in order to do that, I had to have a job. It's not like rent and mortgage is free. You have to have a job, but in order to get a job, I had children, I needed childcare, right? But in order to get childcare, it's not free neither. You need money for that too. And feeling really like this new place I was in, trying to navigate a system with kids was cumbersome. It was hard. It's difficult. And you go to the state and you ask for some help. But I wonder, I was like, I'm walking into this building asking for, some assistance from the states, but I need a job. So why isn't there something posted right here for jobs? I need housing. Why isn't there something posted right here for jobs and for childcare? Why do we have the system that sends individuals who are trying to be self-sufficient in 50 different directions, right? At the end of the day, it's my belief that most people want to be self-sufficient. They want to take care of their family. They want to be, giving into, the environment, giving into, with taxes. We want that, but it's difficult. It's not always an easy process. And so for me as a legislator, I take that premise into the Capitol, recognizing that, folks who see the Black community in a certain way, or who have created that narrative for us, is that we have to be about creating that narrative about who we are and whom we are. We have to be, with all our experience and expertise and knowledge, which is vast, right? It is vast. And those lived experience have a role to play in directing how we need to be legislating at the Capitol, what those bills need to look like, and that we have to stop being in the process of believing that we have to do things for people and we have to do things with people, because those who've been who have been impacted by system, they have great answers and solutions about what needs to be done and what it needs to look like. But often, from my own personal experience of going up to the Capitol, when I was advocating for something as simple as the light rail is coming through my community, I don't want to what happened to me now that I've moved from homelessness to a renter to now being a homeowner, that I decided to live in a community, the historical Rondo community, right, that was displaced by I-94. I did not want what happened to those Rondos families, where the foundation, that the economic driver in those communities was stripped away, those businesses, those homes. We know the wealth is in home ownership, and that's passed down from generation to generation. That was taken away. And as a new mother in a community who had just bought a home in a place that she loved, I did not want my home that I knew I could afford now to be, in my mind, I was going to be taxed out of my home. Right. And all the elders, because St. Paul is a community of like generations of families and elders who have always been here, who own nothing more than the taxes on their homes, who are now on a fixed income. And they could possibly be taxed out of their homes, right? And so we began to organize, and we would go to like our local folks, like the mayor. We would go to city council members and up to the Capitol. And I felt like we was always educating them on things that was impacting our community. And they did not know it. To me, that bothered me so much, right? And when the opportunity came for me as trying to just be nothing more than an active citizen in my community, making decisions about what needs to be a part of my community, what that needs to look like. And history tell us, right? The whole civil rights movement was about a community of people who became active, who began to protest, who began to march, who began to stand up, who began to say no, right? And that is who and what we need to be today, right? We need to be about up there saying to legislators, right? What you're doing for us is not working. This is the way you need to do it. This is the way you need to see who we are. We're more than your story, and we're more than the foundation of how America is.
It's working for them, but not for us, and that's the
It's not,
problem.
yeah, that's right. That's
And
not okay.
what I've always said, State Representative Rena Moran, is that we get the misery, they get the money, and
Yes,
our misery becomes a business for them. And until
yes,
we shift the narrative, as you've just said, we will always be in a position of deficit, and the way that we are looked at and the way that we are encouraged to see ourselves too
that's right.
often is from their point of view, a
That's
point of
right.
view that supports their interests and us as the other, and us as insignificant, unimportant, and an afterthought. And we simply cannot be that. I hear you saying that
We cannot be
we will
that.
not
And
accept
we
that.
are not that. And
That's
we
right.
are not
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, as a state representative, what I try to do, it's like being elected. Our 10 years went so fast. I just have to just say, it's just like went fast. But I remember the first moment of walking into my office, right? After coming off a campaign, that was a campaign of a community of people believing in me, supporting me, volunteering for my campaign. And it was the people who brought me to the Capitol. And I remember after being there a good 30 days of watching people come in, talk to me, tell me what, you know, uh, how they've been supported by the state, the good works that they were doing, why I needed to support them and advocate them for them. And my thought was, wow, where are my people? I
Mhm.
need you up here with me,
Right.
right? And understanding that they're busy, they're working, they're trying to survive, they're trying to make sure they're taking care of their kids and their family, and all the things that is important. And so my first thought was there are great organizations back in my community that are doing great work with our Black, Indigenous, and people of color. They're
Mhm.
doing it. And not only are they doing it, they're doing it through a transformational lens. It's not like, here you go. It's like they're giving us skills, it's giving us tools. And I know that because they gave me skills and tools, by the way, right? And learning how to navigate a system. And I'm like, that's the type of investment we need to make, not where someone thinking that they're giving you something and
Right.
that's it. We are not only impacting, that individual, but we're impacting the children in the households. We are, creating entrepreneurs. We are making kids sure that kids have great educational outcomes. So much like what we do over here in St. Paul and in North Minneapolis through,
Mhm.
the St. Paul Promise neighborhood that you see going through NAS. We are the first and the only state in the country to invest in a promised neighborhood. So, right, so that we look at it through a comprehensive lens,
Mhm.
stabilizing family through housing who are homeless, stabilizing the family, right? Working with parents, giving parents some tools, how to be the best advocate they can be for their own children, right? Not just doing something for one child through a pre-K program, but looking at all the kids in the household, right? And so it's through that comprehensive lens that we know, that I know, that works. And not just looking at education over here and
Mhm.
then looking at housing over here. It's a comprehensive services that we have to do to build strong, healthy communities.
And it's all related, and that has become
Yes.
evident because of Representative Moran, the power of, the devastating power of both COVID-19, uh, that pandemic added to what I call the pandemic of 1619,
Mm,
historic white supremacist thought,
mm,
structural, institutional racism, both in policy and practice, that uh, has historically created the disparities we see that you alluded to in education, in wealth, in income, and in opportunity, and also in health. And all of that now exacerbated by this life and death drama that COVID-19 is bringing to our country and to the world, actually,
yeah.
but bring it to us in a way that forces everybody to look at why these interrelated disparities exist. What is the systemic, posture and structure, policy
Yeah.
system that keeps all these things alive and menacing
Yeah.
to our community more than any other community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That just remind me, in Minnesota, we declare racism a public health crisis,
Mhm.
right? Representative Ruth Richardson did a wonderful job. We pulling the language all together, working with the Posse Caucus to declare. And out of that, we became a select committee, which Representative Richardson and I were co-chairs of the select committee. And as we was having hearings, hearings that start off just like, we're going to define racism for you. Because what happens is that, and what I've learned is that often we use words and people repeat the words like equity, social injustice, inclusion. We use a lot of words, but our white counterparts don't really know what those words mean. So they just loosely using them all over the
Right,
place,
right, through them around.
right?
Yeah.
Just throwing them around. And so we did a lot of defining of definitions for them. Let's
Mhm.
be clear what equity is, because equity is not, equality,
Mhm.
and equity is not something additional. We're just talking about simple fairness and justice. That's all it is. Let's be fair, be just about this, right? Which moves back to, the history of America. And so out of that select committee, after we completed the hearings, we created a working group, and then we had to like create a document about what we was hearing. And by the way, the cost of racism is costing us like $1 trillion or
Mhm.
more, the cost of racism.
Mhm.
And so the question that I kept as Representative Richardson and I was working, the question I continue to put to her is this. We have lots of data out there that talks about white people are 79% more likely to graduate, or 80 of them what, and blacks is this and this, within every system there's some
Mhm.
data, some data. And so I said to her, why do we have these numbers?
Mhm.
We cannot put data on a piece of paper without folks educating folks on the history of racism in
Mhm.
America. So with everything that it's a document, you got to read the document that lays out the history of America, from our educational system to separating our kids from our family, to a small business, to businesses, to economic development, the whole gamut. It's like an educational tool that takes us back, because where we are today is a reflection of the laws and policies, Jim Crow laws that was passed, that was created, the foundation of America through slavery. All of that was done through a race conscious lens.
Mhm.
And if we're going to solve this problem, we're going to have to solve it through a race conscious decision making process. It's no time to be colorblind now.
Right.
It's not going to happen unless we put race at the front of how we're going to solve these problems. And so I am excited about going into 2021 as the chair of Ways and Means to put a race equity lens on anything that holds a fiscal note, right? Any decision that has a fiscal note attached to it. My question to my chairs in the body is, how do this work to eliminate the disparities that we see here in the state of Minnesota? What did that looks like through a racial equity lens? And if you don't need it, if you don't know, we got a really nice document and some recommendations in there about what you need to be moving through this body to create some equity and some justice and fairness in the state of Minnesota.
As you were speaking, I looked at my notes and saw that one of the things that is a favorite quote of yours, I pulled it up.
Yes.
It's kind of fuzzy, but you were speaking to that as you were talking.
Yeah.
And let me let you read it and talk about what it means to you, because you just said it, but have you say it again.
Yep. The significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. And we have a habit of just doing what we've always done, the way we've done it. And no, we're going to rethink, and we need to reimagine not where we are today, but where we're going into our future. Because the decisions that we make today is not just about today, right? They're about what's going to happen for our grandkids, our great grandkids. And we're blessed that our ancestors had that type of vision, Al.
Mhm.
They had a vision, even when they was enslaved. They were like, I would die a slave. I'm going to run. I'm going to change this, because I'm not doing this just for me today.
Mhm.
I'm doing this for my kids, right? And my grandkids. And so what COVID has shed for me, the light that has shed, yes, the inequities that we see in healthcare, the great numbers of inequities around health, around, maternal health that we see, the number of Black women, and we are in like 2020, and the number of Black women who are still dying at birth, giving birth, right? That the stat says that a Black baby is more likely to die within the first year of their birth. And it's not just because of poverty. There is no indicator around wealth. This is like Serena Williams, who gave birth. Beyonce, who gave birth, who was in a hospital. Serena Williams was in a hospital who had given birth and was calling on the nurse saying something is wrong. No one responded to her. So she got up out of her bed and went to the nursing station and said, something is wrong with my body.
Wow.
What she was saying is, hear me.
Mm-hmm.
And had she not done that and forced them to come, right? There was actually, and I can't remember the diagnosis, she could have died.
Yeah.
And the fact is because Black women are not being heard in the medical professions. There are doctors who still believe today, and they're teaching to this, that Black people have thicker skin, that they can endure pain in a different way, so they don't give it. This is where we are now. So when people talk about that's about then, it's not. We are today standing in a place and then continue to solve problems in the same way we did yesterday. And we can no longer allow that to happen. We're going to bring people into the 21st century through our lens, through today's of what and where we need to be going and what that looks like, but it takes us, and us would be Black, Indigenous, and people of color being at the table, helping to make these decisions about what works for us and what doesn't work for us. And that comes to like the work that we have to do and advocate for Black media, right? Black people, as Black folks, we don't trust government. I know that, right? 'Cause half the time people don't trust me, and I'm a Black woman fighting for them, but
Right.
they see me as government,
Yeah.
right? And I know that, I understand that, and we have a reason in a long history of having that distrust.
Mhm.
And so when COVID-19 hit, it was important for us, for me and others. I was chairing a posse caucus, to say to the governor, we need to have trusted messenger of this message around COVID-19.
Yeah.
This is not just about elderly old white people.
Right.
This is impacting our Black community.
That's right. That's right.
You know,
Let me tell you this story, Representative Moran. This is before you got here, but me and one of the residents of your neighborhood created the Minnesota Minority Media Consortium. It's now called the Minnesota Multicultural Media Consortium. And I went out and reached out to a Vietnamese brother named Nhi Nguyen. And Nhi was the owner of the Asian American Press. And together we commiserated about how difficult it was to be owners of our ethnic media. And we knew that the same experience we were having was being experienced by everybody else who was a person of color in ethnic media. So we created this organization so that it wasn't just Al McFarlane going to, say, the Minnesota Department of Health on behalf of the 10,000 people who read my newspaper in North Minneapolis, because I would be consistently denied business. They would not listen to us. They would say, Al, you're a nice guy. We like what you're doing. Nice
Yeah,
little
yeah.
newsletter. But we gave in church on Sunday. Get out of here. And I'm saying it kindly. They say it more roughly in street language. Get out of here, because we're doing business and you're not. So they considered what was the basis for my livelihood in their lens was a hobby. And are you having fun? And my answer is, Marina, this is not a hobby. I'm paying for a mortgage. I'm employing other men and women who have children in school who are paying taxes. This is a business and always has been. You refuse to see it. So we organized and came back to the state of Minnesota in particular, because this was at the time when the AIDS epidemic was breaking. And you remember massive misinformation about how AIDS originated and was transmitted. And that information placed the blame for AIDS squarely at the foot of Black people. And it was Black people's so-called, quote unquote, promiscuous behavior, right? And immorality that enabled this pandemic called AIDS to be unleashed in the world. None of that true. We went to the health department saying, y'all need to tell the truth to our people about what HIV/AIDS is, how we prevent it, where it came from, and what we can do to keep our people, ourselves, and our community safe. Their response was, we are talking to Minnesota through the Star Tribune and through television and radio. And I said, Star Tribune doesn't reach my people. What do you mean? So if your people read, if they're reading, they're reading the Star Tribune. That's what they told us, right? And so that's how arrogant, and how dismissive they were in state government, even at the Department of Health at that time. And I just remember having to show them that in my community, I brought them the zip code data, Star Tribune penetration, Pioneer Press penetration of Black communities was down to 5, 7, 8, 9, 11%. They may have had great circulation and penetration in the suburbs, where the white flight, was there. But in the neighborhoods we lived in, people were not getting the Star Tribune, because why should we pay for products that continue to devalue us?
Devalue.
Stories about us in the paper were negative, right? And they were part of institutionalizing the negative aspect or description or narrative about our humanity. So that's kind of where we have come from as fighters. And you are doing the same fight now. And I want to thank you for what you are doing because you're having a positive impact. So how have you been successful in getting your colleagues in state government and at county? So things are changing. They're not where they need to be, but they are
That's right.
changing. How have you been successful in shifting so that they begin to see us and understand that you're willing to and we're willing to fight for our share of the resources to create safe communities for our own people? What do you think?
Oh, well, so I'm just a little girl that grew up on the south side of Chicago in a Black community that looked like me.
Mm-hmm.
And went to a school with all Black kids that looked like me. Every now and then there was a white teacher here or there, right? But what I've learned, and it's so much like what I hear probably from the north side to the Rondo community to the south side of Chicago, is that we was a community that believed in family, that believed in each other, that helped each other. That's just who we are. And so the woman in me now still believes that, still believe in that is who we are. I mean, things have changed, but foundationally, I believe that's who we are. Right. And so, my life experience, of and my journey is a journey that I'm not scared to share with others, or it is what it is. It does not define me. This makes me stronger. Right. And it just tells a story. And so, and I think about, that me being able to bring that narrative into the Capitol and to still, regardless of that journey, and to still fight for humanity and the humanity in us and who we are, and to help bring some clarity about what other people are thinking or think they know about us. But at the same time, I bring in my community organizing piece with me, Al. And my community organizing piece of me is to, I'm a very good listener. I listen to people, but it's also doing those basic one-on-ones. I listen to people, and people a lot who don't agree with me, who don't see the world the way I see the world. And I try to find commonalities in the message that I'm hearing from them to correlate. I always say to people, I listen to my rural folks talk about, you Democrats, they're Republicans saying, you Democrats don't care about us. You Democrats ain't doing nothing for us. And I'm like, whoa, that's a Black narrative. That's what we say.
Right.
About you, all you folks, right?
Right.
What you're doing for us is not working for us. Right. You don't care about us. So, I mean, that's a common place we can start, is that we don't, like you saying that they're trying to do something for you, but they're doing the wrong thing. We're saying the same thing. Stop thinking that you're doing things for us and do things with us, because quite frankly, that's the problem. Is that you've been doing something, but what you're doing is not working for us.
Right. Yeah.
And you have to see us. So just the organizing piece and learning, to be a listener, doing the one-on-ones, to find out, my colleagues will tell me, I'm a huge prevention person. I worked at Prevent Child Abuse Minnesota, and I get one of my most conservative Republicans to tell me that his father did nothing but beat him every single day.
Wow.
Right. And that's the type of household that he grew up with until he became 18, and he wanted, he fought back following his father, but prevention and but also giving parents the tools that they need. My white colleagues believe in parents. They want to advocate for parents. Hey, I believe in parents too. I believe parents want to do the best for their kids, and parents that looks like me want the best. But let me give you a history lesson about America. Let me tell you what America did and the impact of what America did have on us, not just yesterday, but today. Let me talk to you about trauma. Let me talk to you about average childhood experiences. We may not care about kids back when you was owning your farm, because they was labor for farmers. So education didn't mean one, so we could have an adequate education system, because that didn't mean much then. But we're in a different place today where education is everything. Education is that that place is going to lift us up out of poverty, right? And so it's like we cannot make decisions about where we were and try to stay there. We got to move it on into the 21st century about where we're trying to go. And for me, it's important to help them see beyond their privilege, and defining, we know, as a white person, privilege is not about you not having problems. It's about you having access because of the color of their skin. Not that you won't have a problem with, we have the issues because of the color of our skin. That's our disadvantage, but it's an advantage for you just because you didn't earn it, you didn't do anything about it, you just get it just because. And so, for me, I have patience. I have the patience, right? I have the ability to try to connect what I'm hearing, to take it beyond. I see people are able to share their vulnerabilities with me because I open myself up to, to be able to listen and maybe not even judge. But I will bring it back at some point. It's like, this is what I heard you say, and that is what I heard you say, right? That matters. Then let's start from that place to making it matter. Because at the end of the day, us Black folks don't want to depend on the state. We don't ever trust the states.
Right.
We don't want to have to depend, So I think I just use those organizing tools that I brought from my community. I brought from so many people who had invested in me, who haven't, invested in giving me some tools that I needed, when I was just trying to figure out Minnesota, when I was just figuring out how can I be a good mother, a good neighbor, how can I be an active citizen? What do that look like? And the basic foundation of just believing that if we want to create change, we have to be willing to get uncomfortable. We have to be willing to step out, and we have to be willing to know that this is not about me. It's about bringing a community of people into this process about who we are, right? And where we want to go. And I clearly know that I cannot do anything by myself. That I have to bring a bunch of people on with me, which is why I have to bring the community into this process and get this process and let's work this process, right? And so I bring that insightfulness that I have learned into a community that's, whatever it may be, it is how white people see the world, and that we're going to tap into that and make this world work for us in a way that's going to be beneficial, not only for us, but for our kids, for our grandkids, and for those who come after us.
Yeah. Let me ask you, closing, Representative Moran, to talk about then the challenges, the unique challenges that lie ahead, because we, for good reasons, have some skepticism in our community, in other communities as well, but ours has, examples we can point to. You just mentioned the idea of institutional disregard for pain in Black people.
Yes.
And I know lots of families and individuals who don't get the proper care, haven't received. This is not way back when, but even today, because there's this callous attitude, even in the profession, that, Black people can take more pain. Don't worry about them. And so there's this, really awkward situation, not healthy for us. But looking forward, as vaccines become available here in Minnesota, how do we encourage our people to both think about and think critically and hopefully make the right decision for themselves and for their families? I can say that I've had a lot of thought about it, and I'm announcing that because I'm 73 and I've got compromises in my health that make me more at risk. And so for that reason, as soon as I am available to get the vaccine, I intend to do that, and I'm willing to do it publicly, because I believe I want to encourage other people that hear my voice and listen to me to step up and do the same thing. That's where I am. How do we get our community to be both aware, educated, and make the right decision as soon as possible? What do you think?
Yeah. Let me just say first, Al, is that you are a beautiful 73. I'm like, get out of here, not 73. Just doing also. Yeah, right. So let me just say that. But you're right. Because of our distrust of the medical profession and those who are in it, in government and systems, more likely than not, you're going to hear Black people say, I'm not doing that. I am not taking a vaccine. And, and quite frankly, originally that's my thought too. How many of us take a flu shot? Right? Um, but this COVID is killing our people. It's literally, the numbers are not good for us. And so, like you, I had to think like really hard about this too. Like, when do I take it? Do I wait until those folks take it first and then I take it, right? Or do I be a role model and get on in the front of it and say, you know what, I'm going to take this, right? I'm going to take it because we are more likely, we would be like the Black community, are more likely to move forward with people that we trust. Right. And sometimes we got to just step into that role and be those trusted entities on something that is greater and bigger than ourselves. Yes, it's going to help me. It's going to help you. But at the gist of this is about our people and our community, being able to make sure that they are able to live long, healthy lives. And a part of that is, to see folks that looks like them, that they trust, to step up and be that leader, to be that role model, to be that one to say that I'm going to take this one for you because it's so important for all of us and for generations to come. And that's the way we break down these barriers of this trust, right? I do it every day, trying to break it down, the trust of government, by stepping into a role of government and saying we have a role to play to make government better. We are the ones that we've been waiting for. And we are the ones we're waiting for, not somebody else, not June Jack. I tell people to stop. You are the one.
That's right.
You're the one. And so this is that moment for us to be that one and just lead by example.
Representative Rena Moran, thank you so much for all that you do, for your leadership, for your service, for your voice and your vision. And you know that you are always welcome on Conversations with Al McFarlane. Always welcome to bring your voice and your arguments, your analyses to our publics through Insight News and the other platforms that we have. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing right now on COVID-19 and just continue good work. Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. It's been a joy. Thank you for
and nice meeting you through the voices. And have a good New Year.